weeks ago, and what I've learned about trusting the Lord during this time. But first, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your prayers, your cards, and your encouragement during this time. We have truly been blessed by this church family. Our family is overwhelmed. Your love and support was just so essential to my journey through this time. Actually, the hardest part of learning to trust the Lord and living out that trust came not after the diagnosis, but before. For you see, all fall, I felt like a trial was coming my way. I didn't know what it would be, and during my devotional time, I just ended with, Lord, whatever's coming, I just want to honor you through all of it. In December, I started noticing I was having headaches daily and just felt really tired. So I made an appointment for after Christmas. In true mom fashion, I'm on the bottom of my to-do list. And when I went into the doctor, my white blood cell count was abnormally low. And he had me repeat it the next day to make sure it wasn't a lab error, but it was low. So for the next couple weeks, I would go in once or twice a week to the Naval Hospital and get blood tested, and we watched my white blood cell count decline, my red blood cell count decline, my platelets drop. So by the end of January, I was scheduled for a bone marrow biopsy to see what was going on. The first 2 bone marrow biopsies were unsuccessful. I couldn't tolerate the procedure without sedation, and now I think it's marked on my chart. Anything painful requires conscious sedation. All the nurses know, all the corpsmen know. I used to think I was brave about procedures, but no, I want to be sedated for everything. And I complain loudly if it's not possible. But so they did the bone marrow biopsy, and that weekend before that biopsy was really scary. That was the scariest time for me because the unknown is scary. When you don't know what's going to happen, it's scary. That Saturday night before the bone marrow biopsy, I woke up in the middle of the night. My head was worrying about everything, and I just felt like I needed to pray. I spent a couple of hours on my knees, and I had to trust God that He knew what was going to happen the next day. I had to give every one of my fears and concerns to Him because that's all I had. I didn't have anything else but fear and worry. I call it my Isaac sacrifice, but I had to give each one of my children to the Lord. I had to reaffirm that I knew that He loved each one of them more than I loved them, and that regardless of what happened, He was going to be there for them, and He had a plan, and it would work out. That was incredibly hard to do. But after I did that, I had a peace, and the rest of the time ended up with a lot of praise. The verses that went through my head at that time were Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for good, not evil, plans to give you a hope and a future. And many of the other, there's actually 366 verses in the Bible that deal with fear, such as Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And as Jesus told the disciples in John 14:1, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust in me. Well, after the bone marrow biopsy, actually before that, my trust in God was reaffirmed that next Sunday morning. I actually made it to church with my kids. Brad was on call, and we didn't decide we were going to try to make it to church till 8:45, and the service starts at 9:30. 3 kids. It was hard and amazing. But it was a God incident that we did make it, because Laura preached on Psalm 91, and she talked about what it meant to really trust in God so closely that you were in the shadow of the Almighty. Wow. sounded a lot like what I had prayed about the night before. And she talked about, at the end of the psalm, it says that once you trust like that, you are able to say that he is my refuge and fortress, my God in whom I trust. And then after the service, Laura gave me a slip of paper with a verse on it that the Lord had impressed upon her during her devotional time. It was Philippians 4:9, which says, "Do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind in Christ Jesus." God was at work that Sunday morning, showing me he knew what Monday would bring, and he had used others to reassure and encourage me, reaffirming what I experienced Saturday night, that by giving him my fears and worries, I would have peace, a real freedom from worry and fear. The Monday afternoon after the biopsy, as I was recovering in a room on the oncology ward, I had peace. I wasn't worried. I was waiting for Brad to come pick me up. We figured we'd get the test results in a couple of days. And that moment seemed surreal because my physician walked in and told me that I had AML, an acute form of leukemia, and that my clotting factors were abnormally low. I wouldn't be going home. I needed transfusions of the clotting factors immediately. Even now I think about it, it doesn't seem real. But I knew what AML was because almost 20 years ago, my mom had AML. And after a gallant 6-month battle, she went home to be with the Lord. So I knew what chemotherapy looks like. I know what the inpatient and the precautions of avoiding infection look like. So I knew what I was up against. The DNA test confirmed I had type 3 AML, which, as my doctor said, if you're going to have leukemia, this is the best kind to have, which I'm not sure that really makes a lot of sense. But I think he was trying to, make me feel better. But it is a kind of leukemia that they've made a lot of advances in treatment and medication, and they actually even have kind of what I call a smart bomb drug that attaches to the leukemia cells and takes them off, and I think they die a natural death and get out of my system faster. So I'm finding out I'm not going home. My full calendar and to-do list and everything that I had planned, our refrigerator calendar is full in different colors for different kids. There wasn't time for a hospital stay, particularly one that was going to be long. The laundry and housework, somebody else was going to have to do that. We had a painter in at the time. I wasn't going to be able to clean up that. That was all left to Brad. And that began my 5-week hospital stay. And during those 5 weeks, I learned over and over again what it means to face each day or night's challenges, not by relying on my strength or abilities, but on Christ. Those of you who've followed my Caring Bridge post know how hard those 5 weeks have been, or actually were. It seemed like every day brought a new challenge. First, the chemo made me tired and nauseous. Then I developed sores in my mouth and throat that prevented me from swallowing and made eating almost impossible. My vision was affected, and those of you who know me know I love to read. I couldn't read. It gave me a headache and was kind of blurry, and it was really hard to see and made me more nauseous as I tried. My hearing became very sensitive, and I couldn't even listen to my praise music on my iPod. I just couldn't tolerate the TV. The noise just really was irritating. And then as my counts bottomed out, because that's the goal of chemo, is to get rid of all the blood cells and then wait until your bone marrow starts to reproduce, my platelets started dropping. And they were down at the 2,000, 3,000 level for several days. Healthy people have platelets that are 150,000 to 450,000. So it's hard. The doctors were worried, and I knew that. For several days, the platelets hovered at that level. I had a constant nosebleed. I had large black sores on my lips and in my mouth that looked like I'd been in a fight or something. caused by the bleeding in the mouth tissue. I was at risk of